Last week I disembarked a cruise. It was the first cruise from the UK in over a year, and I thought that the cruise was good. I felt like I was safe on that cruise. I didn't realise quite how good that cruise was though until I got back to real life. Since coming back from the cruise, people have asked me how can the cruise industry be open when here in the UK we're not out of our lockdown fully yet. And I have to say the cruise lines really have the answer to that. The rest of the world out here could learn a lot from the cruise lines. It was only a couple of weeks ago that we were in a really strict lockdown here in the UK. It wasn't until 3 days before the cruise that the UK began to ease its lockdown restrictions, and finally we were able to have 6 people inside our houses. It was very strange for me going from not even being able to see my parents in my house to going on a cruise. That change happened within a week. It was quite a bold move from MSC to schedule a cruise that would leave 3 days after the UK made a move out of lockdown. At that point, you couldn't even stay over in a hotel, so to gamble on the fact that everything was going to go fine and the cruise would go ahead was a big risk, but thankfully everything went to plan to that point and the cruise did go. The cruise that I took was on board the MSC Virtuosa. She was a brand new cruise ship. We sailed from England, we visited England, and we came back to England. And I have to say, everybody on that cruise stuck to the rules, because if you didn't stick to the rules when you were on that cruise, you would be disembarked the cruise. That meant that the people who were on the cruise, they already knew about the mask wearing, about the social distancing, because why would you book a cruise to get on a cruise to be kicked off a cruise? That would make no sense. Here in the UK, we have something called track and trace, and I don't know if I can speak for everybody else in England, but it really has not worked very well. When you go to a restaurant or a bar, you're supposed to scan in and kind of log in. If somebody does get coronavirus, they will notify everybody. But I've had loads of friends who have been notified weeks after they've come into contact with the person with coronavirus, and you can easily go to a bar or restaurant without logging in. The difference on the cruise is everybody has to wear, at least on the cruise that I took, a wristband that tracks your movements. There is no way that you can sneak in without them knowing that you're there. They know who is on the cruise, for sure. The cruise that I took had a capacity of 1,000 people, and the cruise ship was supposed to hold 6,300. This kind of passenger limiting happened all over the cruise ship. You could only have 4 people at a time in the lifts, and there were little squares where you had to stand in each corner. Your Britishism of the week this week is a very easy one. It is a lift. What we call a lift in Britain, you guys in America and in other parts of the world call an elevator. If somebody here said an elevator, I think everybody in Britain, not that I want to speak for everybody in Britain, but I think everybody knows what that means. But if someone asked me if I wanted to go in the elevator, I'd be thinking, you're not American, say lift. The fact that there were 1,000 people on this cruise, that meant that you would only ever come into contact with those 1,000 people that are on your cruise. You might say it's different from a restaurant or a bar on land because that's only got 100 people in it, but the difference is when you go to a restaurant or a bar on land, you have no idea how many people have come through there during the day and who everybody else has been into contact with. On the cruise, there was 1,000 passengers and you were stuck with those 1,000 passengers. Luckily, they were some of the best passengers I've ever found on a cruise, but you were very much in a cruise bubble. Even when you got to the cruise ports, you had to stick with your cruise bubble and do organised excursions. You couldn't just wander off and go back into the general population, pick up coronavirus and take it back on the cruise. You were very much kept within your cruise bubble. Even if you look at this on a smaller level, comparing going to a restaurant on a cruise ship versus going to a restaurant on land, I would argue that going to the restaurant on the cruise ship is so much safer because everybody on the cruise that I took was either fully vaccinated, plus had had a negative coronavirus test, or had had 2 negative coronavirus tests. I went out for lunch today with a friend and I have no idea if the people I sat near have ever tested negative for coronavirus. I have no idea if they've ever done a test or been vaccinated. But on that cruise, I knew that within a few days, everyone had just tested negative. Of course, that isn't 100% meaning that nobody has coronavirus, and that is why masks and social distancing were still in place on a cruise, but you have a much better chance, I think, on the cruise than out in the real world. Hotels are open again here in the UK, and of course, the level of COVID safety does vary a lot, and I think really that is the problem. There's loads of hotels that have a really high standard of hygiene, everything is cleaned, but everybody I spoke to who stayed in a hotel before boarding the cruise said that they felt so much safer on the cruise than in the hotel. The rest of the world really isn't held to that same standard as cruise ships are. Wandering around the cruise ship, it felt like a normal cruise. The only real difference is that you actually felt were having to put your mask on when you were walking around, which doesn't bother me at all, and social distancing and kind of one-way systems in place. I went for a walk recently along the seafront, and my goodness, I think there were more people on a single beach than there were on the entire cruise ship, with no rules whatsoever. I tried to keep myself away from everybody else as much as I can, but sometimes when you're out there and you're wandering around, you can't avoid people. I know that there's loads of you out there who are not happy to wear a mask or social distance on a cruise, and that is totally fine. A cruise is a big investment, not just of your money, but also of your time. And if you're not going to enjoy it 100%, definitely just wait. This is not going to be forever. One thing that I did find a bit strange is that we didn't do another test when we disembarked the cruise. I came home and I've done multiple coronavirus tests since coming off the cruise, and I know I didn't catch coronavirus on that cruise, but I kind of expected us to do one as we left, just so that the cruise line could say, we did it, nobody got coronavirus on this cruise. As far as I know, nobody showed up with coronavirus and had to be turned away, nobody tested positive during the cruise, and I think that is a massive win for the cruise industry and just the start. I definitely think that going on a cruise is safer than going out there in the real world with the general population. Watch this video next and come on the MSC Virtuosa with me. I show you everything we got up to on the first cruise from the UK in 14 months. A very exciting cruise.